Welcome, everybody, to the Contextual Christian Church Bible Study, where today we will be getting into 2 Kings chapter 23 and verses 16 through 30. Again, that's 2 Kings chapter 23 and verse 16 through 30. And I'll go ahead and pray us in. Everybody bow your heads. Father, first and foremost, we thank you for this day that you've given us. And we thank you for all the lessons that we've learned. We know we've all come a long way from where we used to be, both in things that we've become more patient about and in things that we've become more strict about as we needed to learn and grow about boundaries and what's allowed and what's not. And we just pray that we can learn a little bit more about that in what we read today. But we pray as we go forward that we always remember forgiveness and grace when it's due, and harshness and learning and reprimand when that's due. That we may always, to the best of our ability, though we may make mistakes, we always work to grow as a family, as we're supposed to be. In your Son's holy and precious name, Jesus Christ Yeshua, amen.
Amen. So in our last study, we talked about we start off with the Josiah first going to we're calling all the priests, prophets, going to the house of the Lord. All the men of Judah are there with him, the people living in Jerusalem, priests, prophets, and he reads all the words that are in the book of the covenant, the same book that they found in the house of the Lord. After that, Josiah makes a covenant with the Lord to do all of God's rules, commandments, regulations, to follow God with his heart and soul. The people there, they make the same covenant as well. They stand on it. Or not they stand on it, but they make the covenant with them. But after that covenant being made, then we just read a bunch of verses of Josiah just getting rid of a bunch of things that are not representation of God, the one true God. He's getting rid of all the groves, the images of other gods, other altars. We just read a list of things, breaking stuff down, and what I like what Josiah doing is he's breaking them down, he's burning them, he's destroying things, but he's making sure that the trash is outside of Jerusalem, outside of the land of God. Take that trash out there. Even to the point where he destroyed or he broke down a house that had the the men that sell their bodies for currency. He broke that down. The altars that were built by previous kings, his previous generations, Manasseh, all of that. He got rid of those.
Charles, I've
And
one correction I have to correct you, and I've told you about this before. You can't say men that sell their bodies because that's what a slave does too. Right?
oh,
Do
I got to bring
slaves
up the
get paid?
intimacy part.
Yeah, it's not the
Yeah, yeah,
same
yeah,
thing saying that, oh, well, they sell their bodies. Well, what does a slave do? Well, their body is what's being sold
yeah. So they're sell their bodies intimately. That's what I forgot to bring up.
for
Intimately.
intimacy, not intimately. If you say they sell their bodies intimately versus for intimacy, what's the difference between those two?
Well, if I said sell their body for intimacy, first thing I'm thinking about is because it's not for the currency. It's for them to do this and do that. Versus
And how is that different versus saying selling their body intimately?
well, if I say sell their body intimately, I didn't bring up what they sold it for, but we know what they're doing for the reward. They're doing it out of intimacy.
Can I sell stones intimately?
I wouldn't know how. No, you ain't selling no stones intimately.
Yeah, you can. I think you're confusing the two words, and that's your problem. Intimately just means in depth or extremely personal manner. Intimacy is making love or getting connected physically. Those are two different words. If I'm selling stones intimately, it means I'm getting personal with the person I'm talking to that I'm selling. I'm really passionate. I'm really invested in the sales of it. That's what intimately means. You see what I'm saying?
So then I'll just say men that use intimacy when they're selling
There you
their
go.
men that use. He broke down the houses of men that use intimacy to sell their
There you
bodies.
go. Yeah, exactly.
Um,
Good.
and then the I lost
But you
everything else.
understand the difference after that explanation, right? Like you understand the difference
Um,
now?
I mean, I don't know why I thought I said intimacy. I guess I didn't. Um, but yeah, let me get back to the summary. What else was I talking
Yeah, it's
about?
okay if you need to
Josiah
take a second to
destroying.
regroup.
He destroyed. I brought up. He destroyed the groves, all the things that are against God. They're not for God. He got rid of the. Oh yeah, getting rid of the altars that the previous king Manasseh and another king Ahaz had. All of the things that were in the house of the Lord that didn't represent him at all, that represented other gods, getting rid of them, and then killing the other priests that represent these gods. He actually even went down as far as disrespecting, like, extremely violating and extremely disrespecting other areas of other representation, like the high places, for example, a place where they were burning the kids alive in fire, putting the kids in the fire and burning them alive. He's going out of his way to either get rid of, destroy, burn, or just outright disrespect anything that doesn't pertain to God, the one true God. Yeah, that's what we got into.
Definitely, definitely. Now I gotta switch things up, Charles, because they just came back with the paperwork. Why don't you go ahead and do the first reading? I'll do the second.
Okay, let me go. Let me go to the app.
Yep, let me go ahead and change it.
All right, so I'll be reading Second Kings chapter 23, verse 16 to 20. I'm going to give it a couple seconds. Verse 16. And as Josiah turned himself, he spied the sepulchres that were there in the mount, and sent and took the bones out of the sepulchres, and burned them upon the altar, and polluted it, according to the word of the Lord, which the man of God proclaimed, who proclaimed these words. Then he said, What title was that? What title is that I see? And the men of the city told him, It is a sepulchre of the man of God, which came from Judah, and proclaimed these things that thou hast done against the altar of Bethel. And he said, Let him alone. Let no man move his bones. So they let his bones alone with the bones of the prophet that came out of Samaria, and all the houses also of the high places that were in the city of Samaria, which the kings of Israel had made to provoke the Lord to anger, Josiah took away, and did to them according to all the acts that he had done in Bethel. And he slew all the priests of the high places that were there upon the altars, and burned men's bones upon them, and returned to Jerusalem. Oh man, let me reread some real quick. I need to look up what they meant by spy. Okay, so in my first for verse 16, he goes and he sees the sepulchres. And these sepulchres were the grave, these are grave sites where they people bury their dead ones, loved ones, and stuff like that, just where people are buried, dead or buried, and that they're at the mount. And he took the bones out of the sepulchre, out of the grave sites. We'll call them grave sites. He took the bones out of those. He burnt them on the altar, and just It brought up polluting the altar, just making the altar dirty, filthy, unclean. And he's doing this because this is coming from the Lord, according to the word of the Lord, which the man of God proclaimed, who proclaimed these words. So this is word from the Lord to particularly a man of God. This is interesting that he's going this far. And also, he then asks in verse 16, let me reread something. So then he asked the people, what is this? It said, what is the title? So what is the monument? What is this landmark? What is this thing that I see? And they respond to him and said, this is the particular gravesite of a man of God, the man of God that came from Judah, who already said that these things were going to be done, who proclaimed these things that thou hast done against the altar of Bethel. I have to think, which man of God from Judah is he talking about? But I'm gonna keep on going. Oh, Matt, were you gonna say something?
What do you
Oh
mean
no,
you
never
don't know
mind.
who he's talking about? Think about the context. Who's been the only one there?
What do you mean he's been the only one there? We talked
Well,
about plenty of kings, especially with
and
Judah.
but what does it say? Read it out loud one more time. This should be an easier answer than you're making it out to be.
It is a sepulchre of a man of God, which came from Judah and proclaimed these things that thou hast done against the altar of Bethel.
Okay. Who proclaimed all the things that they were doing wrong? It just happened.
Well, Josiah would be the one that talked about.
Yeah, there you go. Didn't Josiah come out of Judah too?
Yeah,
Well, there you go. You were making the answer harder than it had to be. That's the answer.
I mean, the only reason why the answer is harder than it needs to be because it's a grave site. You already have Josiah's grave site, and he's destroying it.
Wait, what are you talking about?
Verse 17. Then he said, what title is that I see? And the men of the city told him, it is a sepulchre, which was the
No,
grave
no, no.
site.
Okay, my bad. I explained it wrong. Josiah is sitting here talking about that, right? So it can't be Josiah himself. Who else did we talk about that had that answer? It shouldn't be that difficult. We didn't have a lot of people coming from Judah, right?
What do you mean? A
And,
lot of
and we're
kings
talking
that
about
are following God.
yeah, and we're talking about Hezekiah, right?
The
I
last one I
mean,
thought of was
the last
Hezekiah.
one,
That
the last
the
one's
last one's
Hezekiah.
I can't think of any others past it before Hezekiah right now.
Exactly. There was no one else that came from Judah. And it said the man of God. Well, were any of the kings considered the man of God? Or is it talking about a
Uh,
prophet or a priest every
I was
time?
thinking about a prophet or a priest every time we were talking about a man of
Yeah,
God.
exactly.
So Hezekiah then is what we're getting into then with verse 17. Yeah, I'm gonna go back and
And
double
now,
check it too, but
obviously, is it possible it's talking about somebody else?
yeah, there's a possibility.
So then, how do we phrase it?
Yeah, there's a possibility we could be talking about someone we've previously read, like a priest, or is a possibility we could be talking about Hezekiah.
Exactly. But what's the most likely at the moment?
At the moment, Hezekiah,
Yeah, that's the answer. Remember, if we don't know something 100% be confirmed, then how do we talk about the possible answer?
possibility.
Exactly. So we have a possibility, a strong possibility that it's Hezekiah based on the phrasing. But could it be talking about somebody else? Of course it could. And so if that's the case, then the question becomes, how do we phrase it? Because we know it's possible, we know it's likely, but we don't have that confirmation as of yet. That's why I said that your answer, you're making it more difficult than it has to be. We don't have the confirmation yet of, or we may not ever at this moment, of who specifically it's talking about. The only thing we do have is the possibility and who it's likely. We know it can't be Josiah, right? Josiah is the one talking.
Yeah, yeah, he's the one talking, so he's still
So it
alive.
can't
So
be Josiah and he's still alive. So it can't be him. And of all the other kings, did David come from Judah? No. Did Ahab, did he come from Judah? Ahaz? No. We had a bunch of sinful people out of Ahab, right?
right.
So the only possibilities that we can really think of at this moment is either Hezekiah or the other kings that had tore down all the altars, because that was a big difference that we were seeing. That's why I
Mm.
said you're making the answer more difficult than it has to be. I didn't explain it right because I was walking past, multitasking, coming back. But that's what I meant by you're making it more difficult than it has to be. You don't have to have the 100% accurate answer if we don't have enough information to specify it's him. We just need who's the most likely. And the same thing goes for you, Chris. Just a heads up. If it ever comes a time where you're not 100% sure and we have something that shows that it might be somebody, but we don't have confirmation, then your correct answer is that it's most likely this person, but we don't have enough information to say if it's them yet, because that's literally the correct answer. All
Gotcha.
right. All right. Now, with all that being said, go ahead, Charles, to continue with your
Okay, so with
explanation.
the yeah, yeah. So with the bones, burning them, I already brought up the whole burning them upon the altar, doing what the Lord was saying, and him saying that it was, the strong possibility of it could be Hezekiah or somebody else with verse 17. With verse 18, he's telling them leave the bones alone, don't touch them. So they left the bones alone, and
Okay,
he
what
put
you
the
just said was
bone.
a mistake, though. You said there's a strong possibility it's Hezekiah or somebody else. Um, the way you phrase that sound like that was one statement. If you say it's strong possibility it's Hezekiah or somebody else, yeah, Charles, that's literally includes everybody in all of existence in that statement. It's either Hezekiah or it's somebody else. Yeah. That's the possibility. You have to give a pause at least when you're explaining that, saying like the strong possibility it's Hezekiah, but it could be somebody else. If you say it's a strong possibility it's a Hezekiah or somebody else, that's one statement, the way it comes across. You see what I'm saying? Even though we might catch it and me and Chris will understand what you're meaning, but we have to take into account other people that may listen. So got to work on how you
No, I
phrase
didn't think
it.
of that because I
Yeah.
I phrased it like that in previous studies, so I gotta
Well, no,
phrase it
I
a different
paused you
way.
a few times. I let it go a couple times when it's like we got a lot like I don't correct. Okay, something to keep in mind, guys. I don't correct you every time you make a mistake. I correct you when it's we got some time to do so or what have you, but I don't correct you every single time. There are times I let things slide if we got the ability to or if it's not that big a deal. But if it gets to be a repetitive thing, then I got to make the correction. This is one of those times. Yes, you've done it a few times. Make sure that let's work on fixing that for future reference.
All right. So back to 17 then. The body, with the bones from this sepulcher, from the man of God from Judah, there's a possibility this could be Hezekiah, but it could also be a possibility of somebody we've probably read in previous chapters, like a prophet or something, or another king. And verse 18, Josiah tells them to leave the bones alone, don't touch them. And they let those bones, let them go, left them alone. There are also the bones of a prophet that came out of Samaria were there as well. And in verse 19, let me read something.
Mm-hmm.
Josiah got rid of the houses that were in the high places. The same places that provoked God to rage mode, Hulk mode, getting rid of them and killing priests in all the priests actually, killing all the priests in the high places, burning their altars, burning men's bones on the altars, and then went back to Jerusalem. Man, he's getting rid of a lot of things. But yeah, that's all I got for my section.
Good. Now, there's only one thing I would add. When you said burning the bones, you didn't bring up, as far as I remember, maybe I'm wrong. Chris, tell me if I'm wrong. Did he bring up that it was the bones of those priests or of the people that were doing the false worship? Or did he just say some bones on the altar?
I'm not 100% sure, but I think I did hear him bring up the bones of the priest earlier, like
Okay.
before the correction, like a while before it.
Did you bring it up during your explanation, Charles? Because I don't remember hearing that part. And if you did, that's good. If not, then that's a
You're
little.
talking about from verse 16?
Yeah, bringing up whose bones they
Um,
are, because we had them taking the bones of it, right?
Let me see. No, I didn't bring up that they were the priests. Let me see
It
where
is
it
the
says whose
sepulchre of the
bones.
man of God, which came from Judah and proclaimed these things. No, it's not
That's
17.
17. 16 didn't talk about whose bones specifically until
He
we
spied
got
the
into.
sepulchres that were there in the mount and sent and took the bones out of the sepulchres and burned them upon the altar and polluted it. So he spied out the sepulchres and then took these bones, and it goes into verse 17.
Yeah, I
And he
brought
said,
all
it is
that
the
up.
sepulchre.
I just didn't say the
So,
bones were the priest of the high place because it didn't say that they were of the high places. We didn't get to that part till 20, 19 and 20.
yes. But when you're doing your explanation, this is where I said before you can't take away the stuff that comes after either. You have to specify that. Because when you're saying that, we have it from 20 confirmed, right?
Right.
It's not just any bones, it's specifically the bones of the false priests that were serving other gods. Those are the ones that he burned on the altar, the very priests that worshiped those false gods. You see what I'm saying?
Yeah, I
So
see what
you
you're
can't
saying.
just say some bones, because if you just say some bones, well, whose bones were they? Let's say he took the man of God's bones and put them in there. Well, now you've defiled the grave of a man of God. Is it the same thing if I defile the grave of a false priest as if I defile the grave of a man of God?
No, it's not the same.
Not the same. So if we have the answer of whose bones it is, you got to specify that for things like that, so there's no confusion, and so we don't. So we show that the distinction. Anytime a distinction is made, like in 20, going out of its way to point it out, got to bring that up in your explanation every time. All right, Chris, go ahead.
Just real quick, is uh is 20 not a separate thing from 16? Because he's staring at the graves that were on the mountain. Then he takes the bones out of those graves and burns them at the altar. Then it just says he slew all the priests in the high places that were upon the altar and then burned the bones.
20 is more of a
So
summary
that's kind of
being
like
stated
more.
of what just
Yeah, that's
happened.
what I was saying. I don't know if they were the same set of bones, but I would just say they're just noting that in 20.
Yeah, 20, you're right. 20 is saying the same thing. It's just summarizing it. So he slew all the priests. See, where it says, and he slew all the priests of the high places that were upon the altars, and burned men's bones upon them, and returned to Jerusalem. Well, in everything from 16 to 19, what did we see from there? We see him taking these bones and doing all that, right?
Right. Hold on 1 second. 1 second. Let me check.
Mm-hmm. Because what we read last time, remember, we read last time of him killing these priests, right?
Yeah.
From when we read 1 to 15. So we
Yeah.
had
And I
where
was
he
saying,
had killed the
right.
priest, And then he had taken the bones of the priest of the high places and the bones from this sepulcher or grave site, graveyard, and he took all that and put it on there. You see what I'm saying?
Yeah. But the only reason I'm saying it's different is because in 15 it said moreover at the altar that was at Bethel, and then in 19, what is it not? In 19 it says the cities in Samaria.
And
Is that not
all
two
the
different places?
houses also, they are two different places, but let me see. And all the houses also of the high places that were in the cities of Samaria. Well, it's not separate because look at how it says in 19, and all the houses also of the high places that were in the cities of Samaria. You see that?
Yeah.
And then it says in there, Josiah took away and did to them according to all the acts that he had done in Bethel. So he's doing the same thing he did there is what's going on, just at a different altar. You see what I'm saying?
Yeah, I got you. That's
So
why I separated, because it's the same thing that he did in Bethel. That's why I said I thought it was a different set of priests or bones that he was
no,
burning.
you're right. You're right. No, it is a different set of priests, but he's doing the priests in this section. Look at verse 20. And he slew all the priests of the high places that were there upon the altars. Well, right now we're at one altar. In Bethel, we were at a different altar. You see what I'm saying? If we
Yeah,
got so 20 is a summary of everything that's happened, not
right,
just what's happening in 19.
right. I got you.
Okay. So, but do you understand how that connects?
Yeah, it pretty much led back to the very first statement we said, how it was the summary statement. We just
Yeah,
made a
pretty
whole
much.
circle of nowhere.
It's like we got a free summary and didn't even need to say nothing. But
Yeah.
actually, you know what? Let me point this out too. 20 is great for another reason too. Look at what it says in 20, Chris and Charles. How much details of what he did it go into? Chris first, then Charles. Did it bring up every single detail that happened?
Not everything, but not one of the main components of what he was doing.
Exactly. Now, Charles, with the fact that it brought up the main components, but not every single detail, if we just read 20 and then we read everything up till 20, we could understand that it's saying the same thing, right? We see how it's talking about all of them. It's summarizing the whole thing.
Right.
So this is a perfect example for when you guys do summaries. When you do summaries, see, in all up until 19, did it specify whose bones were upon the altars? Not specifically. Did it specify all the details necessarily? No. But we do have it in there in 20. So we know and we could say it from there. So whenever you go about to make a summary, I would keep verse 20 here as an example for you. Don't forget any of the important details. The important ones that need to be put out, you have to say. But you don't need to say every single thing. You see what I'm saying, Chris and Charles?
Yeah.
Just the parts that matter to what was read. So that if somebody, when they're listening to the summary, they can pretty much understand all that we read. And notice the 20 is this summary. It's summarizing everything that was from verse 1 to 20, pretty much. And it all got summarized in one sentence. Wait, is that one sentence? And he slew all the priests of the high places that were upon the altars and burned men's bones upon. Yeah, all in one sentence. All that section got summarized. That's what you want to aim for when you do your summary. Everything as short as possible while not forgetting the important details that it went out of its way to show. All right. Now then, I'll go ahead and switch to the second section. Any comments or any questions from you guys as I go to switch? All right. Now then, verse 21 to 25. And the king commanded all the people, saying, keep the Passover unto the Lord your God, as it is written in the book of the covenant. Surely there was not holden such a Passover from the days of the judges of the judge of Israel, of the judge that judged Israel, nor in all the days of the kings of Israel, nor of the kings of Judah. But in the 18th year of King Josiah, wherein this Passover was holden to the Lord in Jerusalem. Moreover, the workers with familiar spirits and the wizards and the images and the idols and all the abominations that were spied in the land of Judah and in Jerusalem did Josiah put away, that he might perform the words of the law which were written in the book that Hilkiah the priest found in the house of the Lord. And like unto him, there was no king before him that turned to the Lord with all his heart, with all his soul, and with all his might, according to all the laws of Moses. Neither after him like arose any there like him. All right, so first question before I go into the summary. Charles, do we have confirmation of who the man of God was?
Still no.
No?
Keep the Passover unto the Lord. No.
What did we just read in 24?
Workers from familiar spirits, wizards, and images and idols. In the land of Judah. Put away and might perform the words of the Lord written in the book of the priest. Getting rid of the wizards, spirit, all those people that perform all those weird things, representing those other deities,
What?
other
What does that have to
gods.
do with that? What does that have to? I said, I'm gonna bring
You
back
just
to the
said what?
original question. I said, do we have confirmation of who the man of God was speaking of in your section? And then you said no, and I said, well, what does it say in 24? I wasn't asking like generic, like what about that specific? Here's a little heads up, everybody. If I bring up a specific question and I ask you, what does it say in a verse? I mean in reference to that question, not just total what's in the verse. What in the verse would reference or be related to the man of God part? Let's go back to your section. Because we had the possibility of it being Hezekiah, right?
Right.
Now let's go back to what it says. Where's the part of it said the man of God in verse 16, right?
You were talking about
According
17.
to
Then
the
he said, what title was that? What title is that I see? And the men of the city told him, it's a sepulchre of a man of God, which came from Judah, and proclaimed these things that thou hadst done against the altar of Bethel.
So we have in here where the man of the city told him, it's the gravesite of the man of God which came from Judah and proclaimed these things that thou hast done against the altar of Bethel. Okay, so we got a specific point in here, right? We got not just that it didn't proclaim the things of the word of the Lord, right? It proclaimed the things of that Josiah had done against the altar. So we know for a fact it had to be somebody in his time frame, right? Then when it got into my section, and I'll switch it back to my section. Wrong one. And in my section in 24, it brought up that Hilkiah the priest, had found the book right here, right? That's another hint, but it comes from what we read yesterday. I'm gonna go all the way back. Where is it? Is it there? 5. And the king commanded. Is that it? All right, yeah, this is it. And read verse 4.
Let's see. And the king commanded Hilkiah the high priest, and the priests of the second order, and the keepers of the door, to bring forth out of the temple of the Lord all the vessels that were made for Baal, and for the grove, and for all the host of heaven. And he burnt them without Jerusalem in the fields of Kidron, and carried the ashes of them unto Bethel.
So now we're still talking from Josiah's time, Josiah's king at this moment, right? So Hezekiah, is he alive at this moment?
No.
No, exactly. So we know Hezekiah is dead. And we know that the commandment here was given to who? Hilkiah. So we have two men of God alive at this time, right? We got the priest, Hilkiah, and we got Josiah himself. But is there any other men in here that were called or considered men of God from what we've read?
From what we read in our last one?
Yeah.
Uh, last one. No, I don't remember anybody else we talked about of men of God.
Exactly. So here's the thing. It now switches that to where it is no longer most likely Hezekiah. Most likely, based on it, it's Hilkiah. Because who was the one who proclaimed what Josiah was doing? What did we see in verse 4? Hilkiah was the one that was proclaiming, the one that's speaking about these things, right?
Right.
Because it was the king telling him to do this. King telling everybody on here. So as we're going through the possibility and what we see, it's now no longer Hezekiah as a possibility. But here's the question. Did we read last time of Hilkiah dying?
We haven't read it at all.
We haven't read it at
I
all.
read it. Yeah.
So is it 100% confirmed that's Hilkiah at this time?
No, just another
No,
possibility.
just another possibility, but it is debunking the one that was said before. So we got confirmation not of who it is, but of the fact it couldn't be Hezekiah, because Hezekiah is already dead before they even do anything to the altar. You see what I'm
Wait, why?
saying?
But why'd you ask the question earlier about do we have confirmation? Because now we're saying we don't have confirmation.
No,
But
I'm saying we have confirmation that it's not Hezekiah. So we do have some confirmation from what I read.
oh, that wasn't the question though.
I said, do we have any confirmation on who it is that we're talking about in your section? Well, if I confirm that it's not somebody that we thought might be them, that is a confirmation, is it not?
We just confirmed that it's not them. But I don't remember
Exactly.
hearing the part
But
of
that is
the
a but that is
confirmation of
a
my section. That I didn't remember that part of the question.
okay. The way I phrased it might have been more confusing than needed. That's my bad. I apologize. I'm trying to work on that. But I apologize for that. But basically what I was trying to get at, it was that fact that we have confirmation that it can't be Hezekiah at that time. Because whoever was proclaiming what was happening at the altar, that's the part that we're looking at. And that didn't happen when Hezekiah was alive. Go ahead, Chris.
I just had because it's a possibility too. I'm not 100%. I'm really not sure on this one, but because he didn't directly proclaim it, but you know how in 17 it says, which came the man of God which came from Judah and proclaimed these things that thou hast done against Baal or Bethel.
Mm-hmm.
And right now he's following the commandments of Moses. So could it
Not
be
against the not against the Bethel, the
the altar of Bethel?
altar in Bethel.
Yeah.
Okay, so what is your possibility? What are you trying to bring up?
I said, could it possibly be, since he's following the laws of Moses, that's his sepulcher?
No, because as we see from here, he specifically about the altar, right? When we read in Charles' section. I'm gonna go back to it. I'm gonna put it back on the screen. It didn't just say against Bethel itself, right? It said in 17, done again everything that thou means you. So everything Josiah has done against the altar of Bethel. So it can't be Moses, because Moses was dead and gone hundreds of years before Josiah, right? It has to be somebody alive now, or alive at this up until this point, because they had to have been alive enough to be able to say what Josiah did to the altar.
I got you.
You see what I'm saying? So there's
Yeah.
technically two other possibilities if we really look at it from what we've read so far from yesterday and today. One possibility is Hilkiah. That's definitely one, and that's a strong one. The other one is Shaphan, the scribe. Because Shaphan, when he found the book, it was Shaphan that brought the book of the law to Josiah, right? So we have the scribe who brought it to him. Now, if he's willing to run and go and preach this and all that, wouldn't it make sense that maybe he's the one who's also talking about everything that Josiah is doing? Right, Chris?
Yeah.
Yeah. So those are realistically the only two possibilities, because we haven't heard of anybody else. But as Charles and I both said a minute ago, the problem is we don't know if any of them have died. We didn't hear about Hilkiah dying, did we? Did we hear about that yesterday? And we didn't hear about Shaphan dying, did we?
No.
So neither one did we hear about them dying. And we know from this context, it has to be somebody alive at the time of Josiah coming against these altars, because he's bringing up, or he's proclaiming everything that Josiah did, as it says in 17, against the altar of Bethel, not everything that the Lord did, which would leave more opportunity of who it might be. So we're down to pretty much two people now because of that section. And it got even more confirmed that it definitely wasn't Hezekiah from that part. And back in my section, in verse 24, where we have Hilkiah the priest about bringing up about him finding the book in the house of God. So when he brought it up, and he said that in the land of Judah, in Jerusalem, did Josiah put away, that he might perform the words of the law which were written in the book that Hilkiah the priest found in the house of the Lord. So there's a stronger possibility, because it's going out of its way to bring up Hilkiah again as being the priest, and Shaphan was the one who passed him the book. But we never heard, was Shaphan, Chris, ever called a man of God?
Right.
So we're looking, and it's looking more and more like it's Hilkiah, not Shaphan or anybody else. But we haven't read of Hilkiah dying. So there is a possibility, but it is confirmed it can't be Hezekiah between these two verses, from the time frame and what kind of person is specified.
Right.
All right. So with that being said, back to this 21 to 25. So we have King Josiah. He commanded all the people to keep the Passover in the same way that was written in the book of this covenant. Now, Charles, I don't know if you remember this. Did we read the book of in the book of Leviticus to keep the Passover, or did we actually read that before in a different book?
Wasn't it part of the laws when Moses was bringing up the laws, like the rules and regulations and stuff like that?
Well, let's see. Look it up real quick just to be 100% sure.
Yeah, I could have sworn it was either Exodus or Leviticus when he brought it up, or maybe Deuteronomy.
In Exodus 12 is the first time the Passover is described. Now, this means that I was wrong about something that I said before. It's so funny how this works. The day after everything, I said I'm going to let it all go, and then the next day there's something I was wrong about, that I get a chance to bring up. It's funny the way God works. Let none of you ever say I don't accept correction or correct myself. That is a lie, because it's literally happened so many times. It's about to happen right now. I told Thomas before, what is the book of the law? And which one did I tell him was that, Charles?
Didn't Thomas answer like the Moses' law, the book of Moses? And I think you said
No,
correct.
no, it wasn't the book of Moses. There is no book of Moses. There's 5 books of Moses. The law he brought up was Deuteronomy. And I said, well, not really, because the Levites, Leviticus, is the book where it talks about the Levitical law. But in Leviticus, that's not the first time that we saw the Passover, is it? No. The first time that we saw the Passover was actually in Exodus. And that's the first time it was commanded. So technically, we both might be right in that situation. And Charles, what you just said was wrong only because you said the book. It's the books of Moses.
All right.
What may be talked about here that we're talking about, because, and I'll give an example as to why, is all 5 books of Moses, where all the laws are taking place. Where did the law of the Sabbath take place, Charles? You remember?
The Sabbath. No, I don't remember exactly. Wasn't it in one of those? Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, Deuteronomy, one of those
It was in Genesis, was the first time
Genesis.
it comes up.
Okay.
God made the world and then and everything, and then in the 6th day, and then he finished his work, and then the 7th day he rested.
I forgot about that one.
That's where, yeah, that's where it first comes up. So actually, and here's why it may be all 5 books combined when it says the book of law. It might be all combined because we have multiple instances now where it's talking about laws that did not start in the book of Leviticus. They actually were in other places. And then to top it off, when they went to the promised land, Charles, what did it say they read?
That I don't remember at all.
Okay. They read all the books of Moses, but it phrased it as everything in this book. So in the essence, you're not completely wrong. They read every part, Genesis, Exodus, Deuteronomy, Leviticus, and what am I missing? No, not
Numbers,
Judges. Numbers, and
Deuteronomy.
Numbers. No, I said Deuteronomy.
Oh, never
So,
mind.
and Numbers. They referenced all of that they read that the whole time. And the kids were there, the women were there, everyone was there. So it is most likely looking like it's not just Leviticus, but actually Thomas was right in saying the books of Moses. I mean, not the books of Moses, in Deuteronomy, and I was right in saying Leviticus. And in all actuality, it was both because it was all 5. That's the more likely answer now that we're seeing this. Not at the time, we didn't have that information, but based on what we're seeing multiple things that have come up in different portions there. Now, specifically what's considered the book of the law, that's Leviticus, but that's not the only place they have laws. Deuteronomy had a lot of laws in it too. So we see that he was sitting here, he had them follow it. Now, this is a very important point. Chris, Josiah is the man of God that there was none like him afterwards and none before him. What did he do when he wanted to follow the Passover? Did he just pick up his things and like, you know what, we're going to follow the Passover and then decide to do it how he wanted to do it?
No, he read.
Yeah. Ain't it crazy? Again, it pops up every time there's a man of God doing the right thing by God. What is the first thing that he does, Charles?
First he reads, but then
Yeah.
takes action.
The first thing he does is to read to see what God wants to happen and how he wants it done. Then afterwards, he goes about it in the way God had said. So if somebody were to say they're trying to do right by God, they're I don't want to use it, but it's just okay. This will be the last time I bring it up, only because it's so relevant to this. Charles, if I'm having my son pray with me, and if I'm having and I'm telling him that you have to try to do things right by God, but then when there's more godly ways and more righteous ways of doing things, I reject it because I want to do things how I want to do them. Is that a man who truly serves God?
No.
No. Now, Chris, if there's a Bible that is easier to understand for people, but the Bible that they're reading, it turns Jesus into a sinner. Is it okay for us to read that version of the Bible?
No.
No, exactly. And why are these both of these wrong? It's the same reason, Charles. Why are both of those examples bad?
Because we're moving at our own how we want to move rather than how God wants us to move.
Exactly. Exactly. Now, Chris, when you tried to correct me just now, earlier on this verse, not the one that now, but in 20, how did I respond when you gave me that correction?
We just talked it out.
Yeah. And if it turned out you were right, then what should I have done, Charles? If Chris was right in that correction?
That's my bad, Chris. You were right.
Exactly. Does it matter, Chris, that I'm the leader of this church?
No, you're human.
Exactly. I can make mistakes. I've made a mistake. I literally just had the mistake coming up of saying that the book of the law is the book of Leviticus. Because as far as we're seeing, it may not be just the book of Leviticus. It could be all 5 books of Moses, which also, if it turns out to be that way, if we get even more confirmation, Charles, I got to say I'm sorry to you because you just called it the book of Moses and I corrected you on that. And if it turns out it's saying the whole 5 books of Moses as one book, then you were right and I was wrong. That's what it means to be a biblical Christian. That's what it means to be a true man of God. It's not just about having a love for God or a desire. It's not just about that. Every time we saw somebody who it said that they did what was right in God's eyes, except for they left the high places up, the places of false worship. What would normally happen to that person, Charles?
Sorry, I was losing focus. Ask the question again.
No problem. For all the men of God that were supposedly said they were serving, they were doing what was right in God's eyes, except they left the high places up. What would happen to all those guys? Generic answer.
Generic answer. That was the ones that follow God but left the high places. Nothing crazy happened to them.
No, they didn't get diseases. They didn't lose their kingdoms. That's not something crazy happening.
I'm trying to remember who had something crazy happen to them when they
One
followed
king
God but
got a
didn't get rid of the high
disease.
places.
One guy had a disease. One guy was stuck to only 4 generations being on the throne. Another one lost his entire generation, was killed and licked up by the dogs. We had Jezebel, who was also killed and licked up by the dogs
I
for
thought that
blood.
king didn't. I thought he was doing evil on the side of the Lord, from what we remember.
No. I'm saying that there was like on both on that side, where Jezebel was doing evil. Her husband was doing evil. But
Right.
we had where there were people where it would leave up, but the one who had 4 generations would be on the throne. That one said that he was doing what was right in the eyes of God, but he left the high places up.
And so God made sure only 4 of his generations would be king because of that.
Yeah, exactly. So even though they didn't have killed off immediately, right? One of them had boils and had diseases, remember? And the son was taken over before that even happened, before he even died. That was the same king.
I think I remember the situation. I just didn't remember the king.
Yeah. So when somebody would leave the high places up, not fully doing what God had said, he would bless them for the amount they did do right and punish them for the amount that they did wrong. That's what he would do. So God doesn't withhold the fact if you're trying to do right somewhat, but if you're not fully trying to do right, you don't get the full blessings. You get punishment for the things that you're doing wrong too. And that's what we see different here with Josiah. Josiah is doing 100%. As it says, he turned to the Lord with all his heart and all his soul and with all his might, according to all the law of Moses. So, Chris, with it saying that, and Charles, with it saying that, keep this in mind, the behavior of Josiah. Because if you ever wonder what does Jesus mean when he says, love the Lord God with all your heart, all your mind, all your soul, and all your strength, Josiah literally did that, as we see from verse 25. So if you were to simplify, Chris, how extreme or what it's like to love the Lord your God with all your heart, all your mind, all your soul, and all your strength, how would you simplify that in example in today's terms?
Uh,
You got far away, bro. I don't know what you just did, but can't
no,
understand
I'm
you.
just thinking. I was thinking. I'm not.
Oh, okay.
Oh, uh, would it just be like, just to simplify it,
You can use an example if need be.
everything, not just whatever doesn't serve God, don't do it. Like whatever's not a godly thing, according to the book, don't do it.
I wouldn't just say that because remember there were kings that did that. We just talked about it. They didn't do anything sinful themselves, but they left up the high places.
Right, but that's why I said whatever doesn't serve him at the same time. That's why I'm trying to figure out a right way to. Yeah, I don't know. I don't know. Go for it.
That's all good. I'll give Charles a chance. Charles, if you were to simplify, and you can use an example if needed, but if you were to simplify loving the Lord with all your heart, mind, soul, and strength, keeping in mind everything that Josiah did, how would you simplify it?
Um. Oh, here's the first thing that come to mind. Because we know, and everybody knows that Jesus didn't sin. Live as close as you, not live as close, but yeah, no, live as close as you can to be like Jesus.
Well, that's what Chris said, but I just gave the correction as to why that's not a correct answer.
Um, yeah, I can't think of one at the moment.
All right. What is the difference between what you guys said and what I just said? What happened with those kings who did all right by God, but they left the high places up?
Just being surrounded by
Things are
ungodly things.
happening.
Yeah. So is it enough for you to be doing right by God yourself? Is that enough if you're really loving God with all your heart, mind, soul, and strength?
No, it's for everything around you to be godly, not just you, but
Yeah.
your surroundings, your family, your children, your wife, yeah, everything
Exactly.
around.
That's what it means to love the Lord your God with all your heart, all your mind, all your soul, and all your strength. It's not just about you and what you do, it's also what you surround yourself with. So remember, Chris, when we were having a conversation about metal, and whether or not we as Christians could listen to it, and which ones we can and which ones we can't, right?
Right.
I didn't say at that time you can't listen to every metal song. That's not accurate at all. But the ones
Yeah.
that were aggression for aggression's sake. And what's the problem with that? And I brought up the example. When you listen to this song, do you ever feel happy after listening to this song? Do you ever feel peace after listening to this song? And what was your answer? No. The answer was no. So that's something we keep in mind. It's not just if the words are sinful. It's not just if the behavior is sinful, but also how does it impact you? There are R&B songs for me that I can't really listen to like that because they make me think of intimacy and focus on it. There are TV shows and movies that we as Christians cannot be watching. Chris, based on everything you know now, would you say it's okay for a Christian to be watching Power, even if they're trying to skip the sex scenes to the best of their ability? Would it really be something okay to be watching Power?
Nah, a better example would be Euphoria because I know a lot of people watch that, but I've never watched either of them. But either way, nah.
Oh, yeah, well, Euphoria, exactly. Or Charles, would it be okay for somebody to play GTA with the name it has, even if they just run a business on GTA?
No.
No. See, loving the Lord your God with all your heart, mind, soul, and strength, as shown by Josiah here, is you're taking into account everything that has an impact. Now, Chris, as far as you've seen and what we talked about, is there anything in the Bible that says that a club is sinful? Just being there is sin. Is there anything that shows that in the Bible that we've talked about?
No.
No, not at all. But if you saw a pastor preacher in a club grinding on some women, would you have the same respect for that man the next day in his sermon, if we're being honest?
No.
No, of course not. Because what you're looking like, see, we don't have to know every single verse to know what looks like godliness, what seems like godliness. And if you saw somebody at a club doing that, you're not going to think of them as a godly person. So even the image that we're giving off, not just our regular behavior, but even the image we're giving off, we need to take that into account with God. So what kind of image are we giving off? And that'll show you as a little self-reflection, are you really putting God first in all your heart, mind, soul, and strength? Or is there this section, whatever the section may be, that you're still holding back? And how can we get you to the point that you are actually putting him first? So whenever you guys think of the phrase or the verse, love the Lord your God with all your heart, mind, soul, and strength, keep in mind two things. One, how Josiah behaved in everything that he did. He sought out what God wanted. He didn't just do the bare minimum. He didn't look to do what he feels is good and only being correct in the things he's accepting of it, but in all aspects. Then, two, the example that we gave here from all that, it's not just doing everything right in your own behavior. It's also what you surround yourself with, the people, the places, the things. Everything impacts. So, with that being said, let me go ahead and go to the final section. Oh, and last thing of an explanation I got to bring up. It was 18, Josiah was king for 18 years when they had this Passover and when he had taken care of everything. He was king for 18 years at that point. And then it goes in 25 to point out that there was no other king like him before nor after. That with all his might, according to all the law of Moses, none of them were any level of where he was. Now, one question though. Chris, does that mean that there's nobody like Josiah, period? Or there can't ever be somebody like Josiah?
No, there's just nobody on his level.
Not quite, but good try. Charles, does that
As
mean that from what we read that nobody can be on the level of Josiah today?
oh, that we just got into.
Yeah, I
Where
did
did it
again.
say that? Which verse was it?
It was in 25.
Uh,
Well, there could be something after because it just said something about him before him. There was no king before him, but we could
Oh, it
have
said
somebody
after.
after.
It said no one after too. Go back to
There's no king
25.
before him that turned to the Lord with all his heart and with all his soul, according to the law. Neither after him arose there any like. Well, to be, you'd have to be better than him then, if that's the case. If there's none before or after him, you would have to be better than him, which that'll
No,
be
because
interesting.
if he did 100% like that, and we already had Enoch in them, right?
Uh-huh.
It's here's where it's still possible. Did it specify Josiah as a person, or did it specify him as something else? Charles,
Or gave the him, so yeah, as a person.
did it say it's him? It didn't say anything
And
else.
like unto him there was no king before him. So
There
he
you
would be
go.
man. That's still a person.
Exactly. You see that, Chris, in 25? It didn't say there was no man like him. It said there was no king like him. You see
I
that?
get you.
So is it possible that one of us today could be on the level that Josiah was? Yeah. Matter of fact, there already was somebody on Josiah's level even further. Who was on Josiah's level, Chris? Or further, I should say?
Uh,
When I tell you the answer, you're going to kick yourself in the butt if you don't get it.
well, I just guess Moses.
Well, Moses was before him. And it said, so, and the question was about after. Was there anybody
Oh,
after him? And Moses wasn't on his level. Moses had sinned in his anger. Moses wasn't allowed to go to the promised land because of his sin and his anger, striking the rock when he was supposed to speak to a rock. So, Charles, was there anybody after this that we know of that was on Josiah's level or even further?
I can only think of one person. Well, Jesus, but that's further than that's past
Yeah,
Josiah.
there you go. Exactly.
Yeah,
Jesus.
Jesus, he's on a higher level than Josiah, but yeah.
He was on an even higher level than Josiah was. Exactly. So, are you kicking yourself in the butt, Chris?
nope, nope.
The lies.
I'm gonna take my
Lying is a
lumps of
sin.
pride.
You said I'm gonna take my lumps.
I'm gonna take my lumps of pride.
I feel it. Because it's such a straightforward answer. Oh man. All right, then let's go ahead and go to the final section. And Chris, it's your turn to read.
All right, finishing out. Second Kings chapter 23, verses 26 to 30. Let's take the word. All right. Notwithstanding the Lord turned not from the fierceness of his great wrath, wherewith his anger was kindled against Judah, because of all the provocations that Manasseh had provoked him withal.
Every time you say Manasseh, I think about freaking Too Fast, Too Furious. Menage.
I just see it as it's read. I don't know.
No, you're fine.
And the Lord said, I will remove Judah also out of my sight, as I removed Israel, and will cast off the city Jerusalem, which I have chosen, and the house of which I said, My name shall be there. Now the rest of the acts of Josiah and all that he did, are they not written in the book of the Chronicles of the kings of Judah? In his days, Pharaoh Necho, the king of Egypt, went up against the king of Assyria to Euphrates. Oh,
Euphrates.
hold on, I skipped 2, 3 words.
Yep. Went up
And
to against the king of Assyria.
to the river Euphrates. That's what I forgot.
Yep.
And King Josiah went against him and slew him at Megiddo when he had seen him. And his servants carried him in a chariot dead from Megiddo and brought him to Jerusalem and buried him in his own sepulchre. And took the people, and the people of the land took Jehoaz, the son of Josiah, and anointed him.
Jehoahaz.
And the people of the land took Jehoahaz, the son of Josiah, and anointed him and made him king in his father's stead. Okay. Basically, we have in 26 saying that he never turned away from the Lord, even with all the provocations and all the provocations that Manasseh did that provoked God to be mad at
Turned away
Judah.
from the Lord?
I said he didn't.
Who did
He didn't turn away from the fierceness. So notwithstanding the Lord turned not.
Yeah, you said he didn't turn away from the Lord. That's why I was like, what?
Should I just say he didn't back down, even though all that stuff that
No,
was
no, no, no.
making
Okay. The problem with what you said is turning away from the Lord. If you don't turn away from the Lord, that means you stay with the Lord. You said he didn't turn away from the Lord, and the last person you brought up was Josiah. So then I was like, if you're going through 26, what were you explaining? Were you explaining that Josiah stayed faithful, or were you explaining that God didn't turn away his wrath? Because you got to reorder your words if you're saying that. Because if you say the Lord didn't turn away his wrath, that's different than saying he didn't turn away from the Lord.
I
See what
got
I'm
you.
saying?
Yeah, so I think I did just say it wrong either way though. Because it's notwithstanding the Lord turned not from his fierceness of his great wrath. So
All right, so go ahead and restart your explanation then, so we can make sure we got the right understanding.
okay, now let me see, because I did look at this earlier, right before I started it. Give me 1 second.
Not a problem.
So yeah. So notwithstanding. So how would I say notwithstanding? Is that like
With all this being said,
yeah, okay, I thought so. I was like, even then, the Lord didn't turn away from his anger because of Manasseh and
yeah,
all that.
even then works as well. Actually, I would say in this specific instance, even then works better than what I said.
Okay. So even with all the works that Josiah's putting in with the Passover and all that, the Lord is still mad because of what Manasseh did. And the Lord said he's going to remove Judah, and as he did Israel, out of sight, out of his sight, cast off the city of Jerusalem. That originally he said, "My name shall be there," which was his house is supposed to be in Jerusalem.
Yep.
And then we get the rest of Josiah, what he did. Are they not written in the Chronicles of the Kings of Judah? And then the last two verses, 29 and 30, we got Pharaoh Pharaoh Necho, who was the king of Egypt, went up
I think
against
that just is talking about it's Necho who was Pharaoh, because the Pharaoh is the king of Egypt. I might be wrong about that, but I'm pretty sure that's not like his name. That's his title and
it,
name.
even looking at it, it just says the Pharaoh of Egypt who fought against King Josiah in the Strongs, or not the Strongs, in the Egyptian.
Yeah, in the Strong's the definition. Yeah, in the dictionary.
Yeah, I see it. I don't know. The king of Egypt at this time. We gonna
Yeah, the
say that.
Pharaoh is the king of Egypt. That's why I'm like, that's literally what the Pharaoh is the king of Egypt. That's his position, title, name.
Yeah, that's
So,
but it was
so
just
that was
confusing
kind
because
of redundant. His
yeah, how they
name is
put it back
Necho,
to
and he's
back.
king of Egypt.
Right. But he ends up going up against Josiah at the river of Euphrates. And the king of Egypt at that time ends up killing Josiah. And his servants took him all the way from Megiddo back to Jerusalem, and they buried him. And they made Jehoahaz the king in his place, in Josiah's place. Make sure I get that.
And who is Jehoahaz?
Uh, Josiah's son.
There you go. Can't
Did I
forget
not say
that
that?
part.
My bad.
No, you just said Jehoahaz in his place.
Got you.
Good. Nothing else to correct there, but Charles, let me ask you so to see if you get it. Why did I include 28 on instead of just stopping at 27? And I'll tell you a hint, it wasn't just because it was too short.
Had you stopped at 27, we will be reading the end of Josiah. Let's say Saturday. We read the end of Josiah on Monday when we could just finish it out today. Because it ends
Exactly.
everything we talked about with Josiah, and then after verse 30, we're not talking. There's a strong possibility we won't bring him up again after 30, rather than just if had you stopped at 27 or stopped at 28 or whatever verse you were talking about earlier, we would still have to talk about Josiah and his son on Monday.
Exactly. So, Chris, when you go to the word and when we talk about it tomorrow, or not tomorrow, Monday, you'll notice that in what we read after this, now we go into his son. But if we
Right.
had, so it's literally just 3 more verses where it's bringing up Josiah. So then we're not talking about Josiah no more. So why not just get it out of the way since it's 3 verses instead of having a context pause on Monday?
Right. Now I understand that.
Yeah. This is something when it comes time for you to start leading, that's something to keep in mind. That yes, we do want to have it to where it's simplified and shortened, but if something could be ended quickly, if it's not without losing context, or if it's such a short thing, then it's fine. That's why when we end books, we don't continue the 15 verses into the next book. Whenever a book ends, we end there, even if it's only 5 verses.
Got you.
All right. Now, with all that said, does anybody have any questions or comments before we pray it out? All right, then, Charles, why don't you go ahead and pray us out?
All right, everybody, go ahead and bow your heads. Father, I know that we ended on Josiah's death, but thank you for giving us some more examples of how far Josiah was willing to go. It's been a while since we read about someone that was even willing to follow your will and your way to go this far and to go to this extent. So these are good examples for us. And I pray that since where Josiah was going to be, there's not going to be anything after him, no king after him. I pray that with what we get into with his son and their son going forward, that we can get into some other lessons, maybe positive, maybe negative, but still lessons we can put into our days. In Jesus' name, amen.
Amen.
Amen. All right, y'all. So that's pretty much it for that. So go ahead and close it out. And then Charles, I'm gonna call you right back after we close it out.
Go ahead.
All
You
right.
got to close it
All
out,
right.
though.
No, I know, but I was just saying so you don't like have your phone not on do not disturb. All right, bye y'all.